Hello, and welcome to the Age of AI, our series covering the rapid evolution of the AI landscape, exploring what's now, what's next, and how that impacts the world of business, the workplace, individuals, and the world. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, Principal Analyst here at Kramer&Co. Today, we are tackling a problem that is both urgent and expensive. The gap between what enterprises are spending on AI and what they're actually getting out of it. So there are lots of data points on this out there, and I'm going to speak to a couple of them. One is that according to IDC's World AI Spending Guide, organizations poured an estimated $37 billion into AI tools and platforms in 2025 alone. But yet, according to Gartner research, only 8% of employees are meaningfully using those tools that they've been given. McKinsey and Gartner collectively report that about 42% of AI projects are reportedly abandoned before ever delivering value. These aren't technology failures, they're adoption failures. We're going to dig into the root causes of that gap, the structural barriers that keep even well-funded AI initiatives from taking hold, and what effective AI adoption actually looks like when it works. Joining me today for what I know is going to be an amazing conversation is Alex Lustig, who's the Principal Solution Advisor for AI at WalkMe. Alex works with enterprise customers every day, helping to solve this exact problem. And he works to help bridge the distance between AI investment and AI impact. Alex, welcome to the show.
Shelly, thank you so much for having me.
So glad. Last time I saw you, it was, 4 or 5 months ago, right before the holiday season. I do have to say that one of the things that I've learned about Alex is that he is the absolute best gift giver ever. I'm just going to leave it at that. A more thoughtful individual on the gift giving front you will never find. So with that, Alex, tell me a little bit, if you would, tell our audience a little bit, if you would, some information about your career backstory, your journey, if you will.
I would love to. And Shelly, I've seen your podcast. You've had some very interesting guests with some very interesting backstories. I don't know if I'll compare to some of those top ones, but would love to tell you a little bit about me. I guess just as far as how I got into technology, I was around it my whole life. My parents both were in technology. Mom was in cybersecurity for the Army. My dad was a SharePoint programmer for most of his life. And I've been around it, but never really saw it as a career option. I studied psychology in college. I went abroad to the University of Barcelona for my communications degree and really didn't have a sense of what I wanted to do career-wise. I had interests, I had passions. When I came back with my master's degree, I was very humbled very quickly. I could not find a job anywhere. I was applying a lot and just wasn't quite hitting the mark in really a number of domains that I was applying to. I wound up delivering pizzas for a few months locally. I was working the day shift at Pete's Pizza. Unfortunately, no longer exists, but it was a very humbling experience. And it really, I think, motivated me to say, I want to find something career-wise that is going to satisfy me. So I got my first job in technology kind of just on a whim. It was a company that I had partnered with during an internship that was a SharePoint startup. They said, hey, we have these entry-level sales roles called sales development representatives. You make 100 phone calls a day and you probably learn something. And I thought it was a phenomenal opportunity. I had a terrible fear of rejection at the time, and that was very quickly ameliorated by that job. So it taught me so much about professional rejection, about how to smile through hard times, and really just the camaraderie of the team was so impactful for me. And that ultimately exposed me to the world of sales engineering or solution advising. And essentially, this was just this amazing gap or kind of half measure between the more business side of technology and then the technical side. And I think the people who could speak both, I almost saw as having a superpower. So naturally, I gravitated towards this role. In my career, I've spent time in the solution advisor pre-sales capacity at a SharePoint, a Microsoft partner, essentially partnered on SharePoint side of things, contact center AI. And now I'm here at WalkMe. Essentially, I came over to WalkMe to help drive WalkMe's AI solution and adoption of that. And it's been very, very exciting journey so far. So very fortunate, very blessed to be here, but it has been quite the journey in getting to this point.
I love that backstory. I will add that I too was a comms major, and I am a firm believer that that is a great foundation for a career in almost any area. Um, I have kids that don't listen to their mother, who's a technology nerd, and who think they're not interested in pursuing that. So we have that in common.
Yeah.
And it's interesting though. I didn't deliver pizza, but I did work in a restaurant or two when I was in college and actually high school, and even one of my I have four daughters. The last two are sophomores in college right now. They're twins. And one of them is a comms major, one of them is a business major, and they're at the University of Kansas. And one of the things that the business school preaches is during your time here, we really want everyone to work in a restaurant. And
Mm,
the thing about that is, and what you learned working those front lines, and what I learned working those front lines, is customer service and
yep.
delivering the very best, being able to look people in the eye, being able to communicate effectively. This is certainly before the age of AI and all of that sort of thing. But I think that is just such an important part of career progression. So I love hearing your story in that, you know, I mean, I look back on my days as a waitress and sort of, am embarrassed by that. But the reality of it is, it was a wonderful training ground, just like your journey was a wonderful training ground. And look where you are today.
Absolutely. Could
So,
not agree more. I say 1 year of retail or 1 year of food service for everybody,
yeah,
and it will serve you no matter what career you go into. It does not
you
have to
got
be
it.
technology.
You got it. All right. For more career advice, follow us. All right, Alex, let's start with some data. We are seeing 37 billion in enterprise AI spend in 2025, yet 8% of employees are meaningfully using these tools. And then you've got 42% of projects, AI projects, that are abandoned before they deliver any value. So obviously this gap is pretty big. And what do you see out there on the front lines? Is it getting worse?
So I think what I would say is the data, especially the data that you highlighted in the beginning, and data that we may see if we're learning more about this online, especially, very much aligns with the market. The conversations I'm having almost every day are about companies who have spent massive amounts of money on AI initiatives, but there is a divorce between that spend, that investment, and the very low real usage. That can come in two forms. That can come in the form of low usage, just from a number of adopters, but
Mhm.
also low output gains, right? So it's a lot of times the ROI that comes from this. What I hear constantly in the market is, we bought AI, we are not seeing value. So yes, we get on calls. I get on calls with customers, and they'll talk about, hey, we want to do a brand new AI initiative, and how can you work with us to get there? But a lot of times it's more of a salvage operation of, we have invested so much. How is it that we can maximize this investment that we have not been able to see return on? So I can absolutely say the data that you've quoted has been reflected in what I've seen in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about this topic, and you and I've talked about this a ton, I mean, across the industry, the adoption issue is a huge challenge, not just for a small part of the business ecosystem. And by the way, this is as much of a problem at the enterprise level as it is at the SMB and mid-market level. So it's a problem. But one of the things that it makes me think of is that probably about a decade ago, um, we were making a purchase of an email marketing platform, and done a bunch of research and thought, I kind of narrowed down the vendor that we wanted to use and blah, blah, blah. And we made an investment in this platform. And it was like, at the time, a 75 or an $80,000 investment. So, for my small to mid-sized company, that was a lot of money. And what we didn't know until we made the investment, signed the contracts, all ready to get started, was that we did not have the internal expertise to not only launch and deploy and manage this. I mean, we didn't know where to start, and we had a very lean team. And so all of a sudden, on top of this expensive technology investment that we had made, we had to invest even more money in bringing a consultant in to help us do all the things we needed to be able to do with this platform. So the reality of it is this is not an uncommon problem. And this is, really why adoption is so important. And it's such a challenge for a lot of organizations, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know until you buy and you're ready, or you're launching this AI program, this pilot or whatever. And it's like, now what? So it is a significant problem.
It absolutely is. It's a great call out there. I think it's very interesting. You've had that personal experience, and what I would say is that experience you had on what you're describing, right, at a more local level.
Yeah.
It's the exact same pain that scales up, right?
Yep.
And the same thing is happening with these large enterprise AI rollouts, which is people have the latest and greatest. They have some of the most cutting edge technology that has ever existed in the entirety of humanity, but it is essentially just shelfware if it is not getting used, right? It is only as good often as the people who are able to use it. It is an instrument. The best guitar in the world is only going to be as good as the best guitar player who is able to use it.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
kind of the gap I think that we're seeing, is that you have to really be so proficient in order to get the value and extract meaningful outputs from AI in so many situations. And that's what I'm seeing from a lot of customers on their front line there.
Well, and the thing of it is that there are many moving pieces here. I mean, it's not just about deploying the solution. It's not, it's also about change management and what you're doing internally to drive change. And, and then you've got the structural part of this. And, do we foundationally have the right structure in place for what it is we want to do? So I think there are many heads to this animal, not just one problem that sort of creates an adoption barrier. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's a multifaceted issue. You can talk about it at the financial level, you can talk about it at the behavioral level, and you can talk about it at the competitive level. I mean, this is something that I'm seeing a lot, right? Is that people are saying, well, what does this mean for my industry? What does this mean for the people who come up in board meetings and deals that are adjacent to my space and what I do? So there's so many different angles for it.
So let's dive in a little more deeply here and talk about why AI adoption is failing. So I know that you and the team at WalkMe have identified 3 structural barriers that come up time and time again when you're working with customers. Can you walk us through those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when it comes to AI, right, AI not being easily accessible is huge, right? Users who don't know where or how to access AI or use AI is one of the biggest issues that we see. On top of that, even if they can access it, they're going to be context switching every single app or ecosystem that they're switching to. So if you're going from the Microsoft suite to the Google suite to SAP, you're talking about different AI agents and co-pilots that are supporting you throughout that experience. Their capabilities change, their UI changes, how you interact with them changes. So I think there's an accessibility issue, which part of which is the literal users accessing it. I so many times have gotten on calls and someone will say, well, I think we bought Copilot, but where is it? And it's so divorced from what we do, but I'll say, hey, actually, if you just go up here and you click this button, yep, that's your Copilot. You can ask it some questions about the Office 365, Microsoft suite. So I think there's an accessibility piece. Reactivity is a really big one, right? So much AI requires users to initiate. They have to know what they don't know. So that is absolutely a use case that is relevant. A lot of times that is the case. Think of when we go to Google and we search for something, a lot of times that's us knowing what we don't know. But business problems, business workflows are often so much more complex than that. And what we have is the most powerful AI in the world with a text box that is ready for us to tell it whatever it is that we need to do in the most exact way. So I think that reactivity component is definitely something that users have been struggling with. And then I think what I would identify from a third piece is really a gap around context and prompting, something that I see so often, which is people giving AI what would be kind of light inputs that are lacking the context to get the outputs that they want. And AI right now for so many different applications and so many ecosystems requires users to be like power users, right? I think this is such a big piece, and some people are these power users, but a lot of
Right.
people are not, and that's totally okay. But they want to use AI, and the business wants them to use AI. However, it requires such expertise that I think a lot of the enablement can be very daunting, and that will
Yeah.
stop a lot of AI adoption from
Yeah.
ever happening in the first place, right?
Yeah. Okay. So those barriers, integrations, the right API connections that allow meaningful action. We don't want silos, and understanding that the apps that we're going to use live inside multiple systems, and so we need to be able to break through that siloed reality. And context plays a very big role. So I love it. I love it. All right, well, let's dive into that real-time context, Alex.
Yeah.
So how important is this from the applications that employees already use? I mean, is it really that big of a deal? And how often is it that context is missing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we can look at it a couple of different ways. So we can look at context as what application is the user in right now. That's important because that could determine what relevant AI guidance gets surfaced to the user. So this can depend on who the user is, what application they're in, where they are in that application, and even what exists on the screen. So that initial context often will help us trigger with AI when a workflow should be surfaced. But context can also span multiple applications. It is very rare that there are complex business workflows that all stay within the same application, even ecosystem. It's often rare that they'll stay between. So a lot of times we're jumping between applications that don't natively talk to one another. And because of that, every time we switch AI, very similar to what we were talking about before, we're almost resetting that context. And we have to catch it up to what's happened before, maybe what's coming after. But I think what's really important is that it is really the entire workflow. If we're looking at a workflow that a business is really entrenched in, that whole workflow contains context. And it's not necessarily neat, orderly, structured context. It can be messy context, but really everything that is relevant information to that workflow can affect not only what AI recommends, but how it works and the quality of the output. So I think context is really the difference between some AI being very helpful and AI being almost there, but not quite good enough to be a proper, business quality output.
Right. Well, that makes sense. Talk with me now, if you would, about single app AI. I think this keeps getting underestimated as perhaps a limitation. Why is this such a persistent problem, and whose responsibility is it to fix it?
It's a great question. I think the single app AI is a conversation that I have all the time with current customers of ours. They will say, well, we're using X AI, and X will be whatever the application is.
Right.
How does WalkMe fit into that? Or how does additional AI even fit into that story? And I think what I would say is there are some situations where app specific, or we could even say ecosystem specific AI works very well within that app or ecosystem. And no AI, WalkMe's included, should get in the way of that functionality. So we've actually built workflows with customers where there will be a step, for instance, within an application that they're using that has an AI step that their local app-specific AI agent can execute. We don't want to get in the way of that because it's going to have some capabilities that we may not even have. But
Right.
I think that the real key is it's really that when work starts in one tool, it often ends in another or goes out to another application. So single app
Right.
is great in the sense that if more of a localized workflow exists. But I think ultimately when AI doesn't carry that context out of that single app, which it's so often that we're doing, that's really where the issue starts to present itself, right? So I think
Yeah.
the root issue is really that it's not just that workflows exist in this kind of single app silo. It's what happens when we want to extend past that single app. And I think when it comes to who's responsible for fixing it, I think that's when we now have to start looking towards agnostic AI that can leverage the
Right.
latest and greatest of that single app. But then when it needs to move, can ultimately do that in a way that doesn't break the flow of the user's work.
Right. That makes perfect sense. So let's talk about some consequences. So I think about when we talk about adoption and we talk about AI investments and things like that, we have become, as a society, I think, so accustomed to seeing very big numbers as it relates to AI and AI costs and AI investments and AI company valuations. And I could go on, but I won't. But the reality of it is, if I'm the person making the decision for an AI powered solution, and I am, I'm putting my reputation, my career, I'm putting a lot on the line, making a recommendation that we invest in a certain technology that without question will not be inexpensive. So, but there's some consequences there, right? And so for organizations that don't solve AI adoption in a 12 to 18 month period, there's some significant risk. I mean, there's risk certainly to the person who made that recommendation and or the committee who made that recommendation or whatever. But let's talk more about that risk, Alex, because I know you see this up close and personal on a daily basis.
Absolutely right. And I think there's a point that you brought up there, right, of just this risk, meaning I think that companies don't want to fall behind, right? And there's this continued spend as a result, and people
Right.
are putting their reputation on the line. I talked with a CFO, I want to say it was 2 weeks ago, and he essentially said, I am putting my whole career on the line
Everything.
for AI adoption, and that AI is the future of our company, and that's where we're going, and if that doesn't work out, then I'm not going to have a job. And I've heard varying levels, all the way up from C-suite down to more local department owners saying essentially the same thing. It is very real when it comes to this fear of not adopting quick enough. From a competitive perspective, I think companies are thinking about early adopters getting that first mover advantage.
Right.
Financially, there's this increasing investment, but there's this lack of return, right? I think there was a very interesting statement by JP Morgan last year who said that they basically saw no meaningful impact from adopting AI in 2025. And
Right.
they have no shortage of money. They have no shortage of resources. And they're saying that. And I think a lot of people, especially in that, in that world, are looking at it and saying, well, then what does this really mean for us, right?
Yeah.
And then from a behavioral perspective, you have a lot of employees reverting to the old ways. So
Right.
I think if organizations, don't solve AI adoption soon, it essentially, AI will become shelfware for those organizations that aren't able to adopt it. And I think if there's any single place from a targeting perspective, right, what happens when it comes to solving it, it's the behavioral piece. It has to start at the ground level with people, right? It has to start with people who maybe they love AI, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have the, AI applications on their phone. Maybe they're not talking with their Alexa or
Right.
Chat GPT in their spare time, but they can ultimately still do meaningful things with AI. They don't even have to know that they're using it, right? But
Right.
I think that's something that I'm seeing is it's the behavioral piece is what will essentially bubble up to every other layer that we're talking about here.
Well, and if you put yourself in the shoes of someone who's learning a new tool, and we all have, we've all been there, right? And so you've got something new, there's pressure to use it, you open the app, whatever it is, you try to figure it out, it's clunky, it's complex, there's maybe some bugs still, whatever, or maybe I'm a slow learner, or maybe I'm a visual learner, or whatever. But the reality of it is, it's very stressful to learn something new. And I also have a job to do, and I have obligations to meet, and I have goals to meet. And
Yep.
so if fooling around with this new thing is so much of a challenge that it stresses me out, and it puts me in a position where I can't deliver what I'm supposed to deliver when I'm supposed to deliver it, I'm going to use what I know will. And that's what we don't want to have happen. But that's human nature,
That's exactly it. And I think
Yeah.
it's people not wanting to lose their voice. I mean, people
Right.
have created a reputation for themselves at work. And I used to have a
Yeah.
manager, and he said, "What do people care about more than anything else?" It was one of my first days at a new job, and everyone would answer, and they would say, money. People would say their job title, and
Right.
He says, no, it's personal reputation, right? And if AI challenges that personal reputation in a way where the user doesn't feel like they have control over it,
No
then
confidence.
it's
Yeah.
not going to get adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say this, and I will admit to some bias as it relates to WalkMe. I have been working with, with the team at WalkMe since the early days of the company launch. And in the days when digital adoption was not something that people were thinking about, a digital adoption platform was nomenclature that no one had heard of. And there were no real light bulbs going off about what we're investing in. This is even before the days of AI, but what we're investing in from a technology stack basis within our organization and what value we're getting out of that technology stack. And the reality of it is, if adoption doesn't happen, value doesn't happen either. And so over the course of that last, I don't know, almost decade of really being familiar with WalkMe, what I have personally experienced is being able to, and I did this again just recently at an analyst event, but you guys do a great job of doing demos where I can walk up to a computer and try to do something that I need to do. And maybe it's onboarding as a new employee, just as an easy example, or maybe it's filling out an insurance claim form or something like that. But something that, it's not brain surgery. It's just a little bit time consuming. It's form fills that you have to fill in, a process that you have to follow. And I have been able to do, try to complete a claim form on my own, and then have an experience of completing that same claim form using WalkMe's technology. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is, it really is never not an overwhelming moment, because it does speed things up. And I think that when employees can see this and they can say, and I always think of, I always think of the WalkMe solution as sort of like this little guardian angel sitting on my shoulder, watching my workflow, learning what's important to me. Of course, now in this age of AI, that's, even more important than ever. Watching what I do, watching how I work, and making that process easier and serving up information and tips and suggestions when I need it. And all of a sudden, adoption is no longer scary. It's like I have this personalized tour guide that is, walking me down this path, and I'm not alone and I'm not scared. And I'm making some really cool things happen. And to me, that's the magic of the WalkMe technology. And it just plays such a huge role in making complicated things, scary things, less complicated and less scary.
Yeah, we love doing that. What you mentioned is what we call the WalkMe Challenge. We'll bring that to conferences. We'll bring that to all kinds of different shows and experiences that we provide. And I think you bring up a really interesting point, and this is true for WalkMe from the AI perspective, and even just what we do from a core digital adoption side of things, which is it's not just onboarding. A lot of times it is making an expert simply more productive and saving them some time and saving them some cognitive effort. And we see this from customers. This is even how we use WalkMe internally, which is, I can open up, for instance, a new page, and maybe it has 1,500 words on it, and I can read that. I'm a pretty quick reader, but I'm nowhere near as quick as the AI summarize button that we'll have that will say, hey, here are the 3 or 4 things that you need to know that is very personalized to me. So I think that's a really awesome part of WalkMe is we can help people who maybe don't know what they're doing. They're in an application for the first time. They don't know where to go. We can make them better. But on the other side, we can absolutely give a productivity booster to people who know exactly how to fill out that form that you're talking about, or exactly how to go through the workflow, and just simply help them do it more efficiently.
Right. Right. And the examples I used are very simple examples, but obviously there are way more complex use cases that, once you get your appetite wet, it's kind of like the sky's the limit. And that to me is really exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about AI shelfware, and the reality of it is, and I find it incredibly painful to think about, much less say, but wasting a spend on an AI budget is just cringe inducing. But it happens. So talk with me, if you would, about what that AI shelfware looks like in practice.
Yep, absolutely. So the first thing that you'll hear on this, and Shelly, I think you've heard this, I hear this on so many of the calls and customer
Yeah.
conversations that I have, are some exorbitant amount of licenses that have been purchased or obtained relative to the number of employees at the company. So it will be a very, very high percentage of, we've purchased this many licenses, and you can usually do the math and it's like 70% of the workforce, right? It's such a high amount. But this would mean that these are tools that are rarely used. So there may be some initial excitement about this. There's some emails that go out initially. Maybe there's some enablement sessions, but there's usually a pretty quick drop off after rollout. We've seen this very frequently across various enterprises, and it sounds something like, we've invested, but nothing's changed. So you see that monetary commitment, but to our point earlier, you're not seeing that behavioral change, right? So it's very common, I'd say, but it's a difficult conversation to have with customers, of kind of the realization of, okay, well, this wasn't what we wanted it to be. And then I think once we have that understanding of, well, what's the adoption been, then we can start to ask, questions about aspirationally, where did you want to go? What were you hoping that this did? And then,
Right.
kind of proceed from there in a way that's helpful for them.
Got it. One of the things that I have always been impressed by in terms of WalkMe functionality is that, and I'm trying to use this example to step back a little bit. We're talking about adoption. We're talking about the importance of adoption. So you make a decision to bring an AI solution in-house, to announce it, to get everybody excited about it, to have training sessions, all the things, right? But what WalkMe's functionality allows leaders to see across the board is this: okay, we launched this, and we've told people and we've given access and everything else. But what the platform allows you to see is, okay, Alex jumped in. He seems to be doing great. Oh, look, he's using it, more and more every day. Shelly, on the other hand, she keeps getting stuck right here and then abandoning. And oh, by the way, Melissa is having the same problem that Shelly is, and so being able to identify where people are getting hung up, and also where people are soaring through, like, you're apparently so much smarter than the two of us are. But that is incredibly valuable intel, because it allows you to fix the problem right where it's happening.
Yeah, I would say specifically for how WalkMe approaches this is, every user is different and every
Yeah.
user's learning curve is going to be different. We fundamentally, with WalkMe, with AI, with our core adoption software, we want to meet users where they are. And that, I think, in many ways goes back to what we were talking about from a contextual perspective, right? Understanding who the user is and what it is that they're doing, but also meeting them where they are from a knowledge perspective, right? That we're going to make sure that we can basically meet a user where their various skill levels are. So if they just need some assistance because they need a productivity gain, great. If they've never done something before, we can use digital adoption principles in conjunction with AI to help them do that thing for the first time and make them successful, right?
Yeah.
Instead of them having to spend potentially an infinite amount of time pinging people, looking up different articles, right? All these things that people typically do from that swivel chair effect is brought into a singular flow of work.
Yeah. Those are all my most hated things to do, by the way. Follow a link to try to figure out why I'm having the problem. Yep. Watch this video. That this is descending into hell. In my book.
It is very hard, and I've spent a lot of my career doing that, and it is so much easier now. And I love getting to provide that experience for customers, because it is such a ubiquitous pain point that I'd say all organizations are facing in some form.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's pivot to the solution side a bit. Where do digital adoption platforms fit in the enterprise AI stack today, and how have you seen that role evolve, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're doing from the digital adoption side of things, the AI stack, is we're shifting that conversation from who has AI to who is actually using AI. I think success for AI has often been measured from a deployment perspective, and this is back to what we were talking about. From we procured this many licenses, right, and that was success. We got everybody access, so we can check that box. But there's a different kind of success that digital adoption addresses, which is essentially operational success. Can the AI scale? Are people using it repeatedly to get outcomes and outputs that they are happy with, and that the business is good for the business, essentially? So what we're focusing on now are consistent, scalable usage, and then really what the digital adoption layer is the layer that embeds AI into workflows. It's not something over here. It's not this separate tab. It is something that is with you, the user, no matter what application you're in, no matter where you're going, if it's a friendly or unfriendly application from an integration perspective relative to where you are. That is really where we are like fitting into AI and kind of how we're positioning ourselves, right? So we're moving much more towards being the core infrastructure for AI, but really more that behavioral infrastructure that allows that adoption to take place. Because the behavior, again, like we said, that's so critical to this actually being successful. It has to start with people using it and really how they feel about that experience, how they feel about the outputs they're getting.
Right. And that right there is the key to success.
That's it.
The key to success. So, talk with me, Alex, about how CIOs should be thinking about digital adoption platforms in their 2026 and beyond AI stack planning.
Yep. I think it goes back to a little bit of what we were just talking about, focusing not just on deployment, but focusing on usage.
Okay.
AI definitely has to be embedded into real workflows, and real workflows are often messy. They're often going to many different places. They're often relying on context from many different applications. So that is going to be very important, along with enabling employees, not just the tools, right? So it's not just about making sure that they have the latest and greatest. It's that they have the opportunity to use the latest and greatest in a way that's not threatening to them. It's not threatening to their reputation, and allows them to think across systems, right? Not point solutions, not, hey, users do this one thing in this one place, because AI can be very, very helpful there. But I think really thinking across systems and thinking more broadly into larger workflows is really how it's going to have a meaningful end user impact. So I think we measure success by impact, not by access, not by licensing. It's actually, are people using this, and can we scale this?
Yeah, absolutely. And, to me, and I know you very much agree, the key here is AI being embedded into the flow of work. It's not an add-on, it's not a separate interface or a sidebar or anything like that. It is literally embedded in the flow of work. So I'm thinking that I'm thinking that, are you seeing more of this understanding across the board from your enterprise customers?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing from enterprise customers, and I talk with quite a few, we have some as customers, and we get to see their journey with AI, which has been great, is they fundamentally understand that there is the behavioral gap, and there is the kind of chasm between the tools and the people using them. I think what I find that they're missing often is the connective tissue, is that they don't have a way to bridge the gap between A and B in a way that users are like, I get this, I understand this, right? That's really what I think we wind up doing a lot of, especially on the kind of solution side of things that I'm on. Our team is having those conversations with users about primarily like, how is it that we can bridge the gap from a solution perspective? Connecting could be different AI, could be different systems, but I think that connective tissue piece is probably the biggest thing that I see at that enterprise level, at the C-level conversations that I have, that they're missing, because they got all the latest and greatest tools, but there is not enough connectivity between them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So, Alex, can you walk me through a real world example of what this magic of this seamless cross app AI orchestration actually looks like in practice?
I would love to tell you about that. So we have a very large accounting firm. I'd say this is our biggest WalkMe AI client in particular.
Okay.
They have a workflow, and this was really their key workflow, right? Is that they said they want to target a quote to cash process. It goes across 8 different systems. Now,
Okay.
this is one of many workflows that they have. They have a very, very comprehensive AI initiative. And they say, this is our AI initiative. Where can you fit within this? And we looked and we said, this is absolutely the lane, right? We saw a set of workflows, this being one of them, going across 8 different systems, none of them friendly with each other. So that means that the current process was user goes from system A, B, C, D, 8 different times. And then with that, they're having to carry context with them the entire time. There wasn't a solution that could really talk with all of these applications and be there. So no AI could be there for the entire workflow, right? And really what we did was we introduced AI that maintained context across each step and then across applications, which was super cool. So we could guide the user through that entire process end to end with AI suggestions throughout, generating AI text for them, helping them to fill out very key fields and things that were needed for this quote to cash process. And ultimately, we were really good about reducing the number of manual steps, but ultimately lowering the risk. That was a big part of this project. Was they said, hey, we have this workflow. It is very high risk in the sense that because there's so much manual input, it often will have something wrong with it, and then this will get kicked back, and this will be a long time before we're paid, right? And that's really the whole workflow, is trying to get paid. What we were able to do, we were able to do is just go ahead and basically string all of that together, make sure that we have AI that's looking at that high risk information, making sure that it has all the right information, it's up to standard. We were able to reference their policies along the way. So they had all these policies for how this process is supposed to be done. Our AI would reference that at the key steps, which was really cool. And they've seen much, much lower turnaround when it comes to the back and forth that you'd see when there were like failed quote to cash processes. So this was a really big one for us. This has been a kind of a flagship case study, and it's something I love talking about. I tell so many people about this customer and this use case.
Yeah, well, it's it's a really great example and kind of easy to get your head around that. Alex, as we move collectively toward agentic AI agents, and these are agents who are acting autonomously across systems without human checkpoints, it kind of goes without saying that AI governance has never been more important than it is now, right? So why touch on this for us, if you would, a little bit? Why is this such a big deal?
So if you're looking at AI governance, especially as we move into this autonomous agentic is often the term, right? Agentic world. Yeah. Essentially what the AI is doing is acting on behalf of employees. I was just on a call with a customer last week, and they said they're not just releasing their new AI enabled workforce, they're releasing their new autonomous workforce. And they have an agent hub essentially with all these agents that can do all these different things. And they have the agents talking to one another. And it's super cool, but it's also extremely new and brings up a lot of questions about governance, right? Because within this, when you have AI acting on behalf of employees, right, you need to make sure that there is permission control. We need to make sure that there are correct identity access management, right? We need to track the actions. We need to make sure that we have auditability, right? So trust, I think, becomes key for adoption, right? Governance essentially is going to enable safe scaling of those autonomous agents, that autonomous workforce, and that's how we can make sure that they stay employees and not detractors, not something that is straying from what the company ultimately wants them to be.
Yeah, well, governance enables trust.
Yep.
I mean, the reality of it is we do using AI, especially agentic AI solutions, requires a significant degree of trust, and how you get to that trust is the governance layer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So what, Alex, do you think CIOs should prioritize in 2026 to help them actually close this AI adoption gap? Not just, invest in it, but to actually close the gap.
I think for 2026, CIOs ultimately have to focus on the behavioral layer, right? Making sure that people feel comfortable using AI at the most local levels so that we can have really champions. And then with champions, you can have this bubble up into organic AI adoption. I think people being happy about AI, people talking about AI is absolutely the best champion. The CIOs, the C-suite, executive leadership, they can sell AI initiatives high and low. But I think when it comes to getting people using it, getting people talking about it, getting people sharing their ideas, and ultimately creating a culture of AI collaboration and kind of AI data sharing. We have this internally. This is something that's worked tremendously well for us internally. Is we meet a couple of meetings a week where there's kind of AI related office hours. I think these are really, really great initiatives. And then I think the big part is if you're seeing the fragmented kind of fractured AI adoption, which is maybe there's a small group of power users, or maybe you're not seeing AI talking with one another. I think it's building in that connective tissue that is so, so important when it comes to making sure that your AI systems can ultimately be consistent experiences for users, because user work is complex, user work can be messy. And I think that is something that is so important.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking about a couple of things. First of all, the power of community
Yep.
cannot be overstated. And I have had conversations with organizations who do all kinds of things. Maybe it's a Slack channel that's sort of like, AI tips of the week or AI aha moments where people are popping in and sharing, oh my gosh, I just plugged this in and using it as, whatever, and sort of sharing their journey as we all dive in and learn AI. But I will tell you, I office from home. My husband, who works for a Fortune 100 company and who's in sales, works from home. And every now and then I'll be doing something, I'll be experimenting with something in AI that I haven't before, and something like amazing. I'll do something amazing. And it's just like, I can't help it. Like I go across the house to his office to go, do you have a minute? Come here, let me show you something. But those are little actions, but cumulatively, when that kind of discovery happens, and you touched on this in the beginning of your answer to this question, that's what drives adoption too. And adapt fundamentally helping with that plays a big role, but it's also creating this culture around discovery around AI. And I think that when you can do that, and when you can get people excited about talking about, oh my gosh, this is what I discovered, I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's something that gets me excited. It's something that I love hearing gets other people excited.
Yeah.
Like something we're doing internally that has been a phenomenal initiative that I've been working with the team on is vibe coding, right? So
Yeah.
you can, instead of having to be a developer, you can type the application you want. And there's so many applications that do this, but you can say, I want an app that does this. And you wait 5 minutes and it comes out of the oven and it's 80% what you described. You give it a couple of corrections and then it's basically 100% what you described. And it's unbelievable the power of this. And it creates these aha moments. And I think that's another thing, is getting people excited about AI. Just it can be adjacent. I mean, it doesn't have to just be digital adoption AI. I think that's
Right.
such a core part of it. But if people are having engaging AI experiences, it's going to make them more open and more receptive to other forms of AI. So
Yeah.
AI communities where people can share tips and tricks that they use for work, or cool applications that they've vibe coded, which is a big one that we're doing internally right now, has been phenomenally helpful for the team just when it comes to adopting alternative or kind of like adjacent AI initiatives.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. All right, Alex, as we wrap, what's the one thing you want every CIO or digital transformation leader listening to this, watching this, reading this, however it is they're consuming it, what would you like them to walk away with?
I love it. I would say that I think AI should ultimately be an equalizer across the organization. It is not meant for 5%. It is not meant for 10% of the workforce. And those numbers are not what leads to success. It is everyone adopting AI. That's going to come in different forms. People learn in different ways. People are going to use it in different ways. People are going to gain value from it in different ways. But ultimately, I think AI should be an equalizer across the organization. And that is what true AI success means as we move into this new AI future that we're in.
Excellent. I love it. All right, folks, the AI adoption gap is real. It's expensive, and that gap is not going to close on its own. The data is clear. The problem is not the models, and it's not the budgets. It's the structural barriers that Alex and I have talked about. It's the missing context, the siloed tools, and the absence of that integration layer that lets AI actually act. Digital adoption platforms are emerging as that missing layer. And the organizations who figure this out first, they're going to build a competitive advantage that will be genuinely hard to replicate. So many thanks to you, Alex Lustig, Principal Solution Advisor for AI at WalkMe, for joining me today, for sharing such a grounded practice take on what it actually takes to move from AI investment to AI impact to AI delivering value. And if you're wrestling with this problem in your organization, I hope this conversation gave you a clearer picture of where to start. With that, this is Shelly Kramer, Principal Analyst at Kramer&Co. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Alex, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Shelly, and thank you to your amazing audience. Really appreciate everyone listening.
Absolutely. Well, we'll see you again here next time. Thank you so much.